Before the clock so rudely interrupted us last time, we were talking about all the zillions of kinds of planning problems that there are. Whether you do things one at a time or in parallel, whether all actions have the same duration or the same cost. What's your objective? Are you minimizing the make span? Who remembers what the hell make span is? Dan, what's make span? Make span. Span. The span of a bridge. We all know the span, that sense of the word span. Make span, if you're in a factory and you're making something, the make span is maybe the span.
Start to finish.
Yeah, exactly. The time it takes you to make the thing. So it's the make span, the span of the making. From when you start to when you end. So in the presence of parallel actions, minimizing make span, like you could have a zillion actions. As long as they happen all at once, the make span could be really low. So that's what make span is. Some people really care about minimizing make span. Some people care about minimizing costs. Some people want a combination of the two. Sometimes people are crazy enough to not know what they want. And this is quite common in reality, that people are like, oh, I don't know, just give me some options. And that's called multi-objective planning, where the planning algorithm is supposed to come up with every non-dominated plan. A dominated plan is one where there's a better one. So, for example, you can get the same make span for less cost. So that plan will be dominated. But you might have one that has low make span, high cost, another one that's high make span, low cost, and neither of those dominates the other. So these plans are non-dominated. So there's this frontier. Oh, time for a picture. There's this. If you want to throw around fancy lingo to impress your friends, you can talk about the Pareto frontier, because apparently there was some economist named Pareto. And here we've got cost, and here we've got make span. And why do I draw these pictures so small? So here's high make span, low cost. Here's high cost, low make span. Here's a plan that is not good. It has been dominated. You can think of there being little lines coming out of each of these guys. And anytime you're up here, you're dominated by this plan. If you have the same make span but a higher cost, you are dominated. If I had a plan down here, yeah, that's good. That extends the frontier out. So the Pareto frontier would be these three undominated plans there. That's called multi-objective planning. Everybody understand that? Make sense? Multi-objective. You have multiple objectives, and I'm not willing to tell you how to combine them at all.
I assume you can probably do this in n dimensions. You just couldn't draw it as nicely.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very bad at drawing 4-dimensional space, or even 3-dimensional space. I'm pretty bad at. So we have make span. The question is also, so what's changing in the world? Is it just like logical things that are true and false become true, become false, or are metric quantities changing, like battery level and stuff like that? Are you planning offline or online? Even Shaky was planned offline. Like they go and they run the planner and it figures out what to do, and then Shaky goes and does it. Shaky only stops if the world somehow doesn't evolve according to the model. Sometimes people try and combine planning and execution and do it all at the same time. Plan a little bit, execute a little bit, plan a little bit, interleave planning and execution. Sometimes when you're planning, more goals come in. That's very much like life. Like you're going along with your week, and then someone says, "Oh, by the way, would you do this extra task for me?" And you're like, "Oh, great, thanks. Yes, of course, I'd love to do that task." So that's very much an online setting. This is interesting. This gets a little bit at determinism here. One question is whether when you do an action, can you predict what's going to happen? Are the actions deterministic? So if you tell a robot to go forward a meter, Does it actually go forward a meter? Like, you'd be amazed at all the things that can go wrong with a robot. Like going from one surface to another, like carpet to linoleum, right? They tend to be at slightly different heights, and one of the wheels gets stuck. So and the other wheel is still spinning. So you told the robot to go forward a meter, it goes, the wheel gets stuck, and the robot's now like this, right? And you told it to go forward a meter, and it's now turned. So that's a non-deterministic action. There's stochasticity, randomness in the actions. Now this is a slightly separate question. This is whether you control everything in the world or whether there's some other things happening in the world as well. Like if I'm predicting what the next state is going to be, is it just a function of my action, or is it a function of my action and some other things happening in the world? Like if I let go of this, without my doing anything, it will fall to the floor. All I did was let go. I didn't make it go down. So there are other processes. So that's slightly different. Here we're talking about the outcome actually being unknowable until execution time. It's not just that there's some sort of, they're also called exogenous processes outside you that happen. The question is whether they're predictable or not. In a stochastic world, a world of stochastic actions, you can't know what's going to happen. You just have to try and see. Everyone understand the difference between autonomous processes and stochastic actions? Everyone get the difference? Then there's a question of whether you have a single agent problem, like whether your planner is planning everyone's actions or whether you have other agents modifying the state of the world. Sometimes if there are other agents, you can just treat the world as stochastic. Like, I don't know, you could treat chess as a stochastic game. Like, I moved my pawn, and then all of a sudden some other pawns moved. I don't know why. That would be kind of poor, because we know like things like minimax, we can try and guess what the other players are likely to do, rather than just treating them as random noise on the board. But you could treat them as random noise, I suppose.
When you're playing against an amateur, that might be the best thing to do.
It could be, yes.
You're playing against me, yeah.
It's not going to be random. It's going to fall within a set of rules. A pawn's not something that move across the board. It's going to...
Whoa! Great question. Great comment. Okay. The word random is used colloquially in everyday conversation to mean a bunch of different things. And we're going to see random things soon, in like a week. Well, then there's spring break, but after spring break. And I guess when I'm talking about stochastic actions, I mean that there is some probability distribution that the outcomes are sampled from. So we have knowledge. We have some knowledge about what will happen. If we have no knowledge, then you could maybe model that as the uniform distribution over all possible outcomes. But typically with probabilistic planning, like we have a pretty good idea that if we say go forward, the robot has like a 0.8 probability of going forward and 0.1 of being over here and 0.1 of being over here. So we have some knowledge. We have some probability distribution. And if we have no prior knowledge, we could just have the uniform distribution. So it's not necessarily that everything is possible. It's just that we don't know exactly which particular thing is going to happen. State observability. Can we see what's happening? What's an example of a situation where we have only partial observability? Lights out.
But we can still hear.
I don't know lights out. Is that a popular game?
No, I'm just saying the light.
Oh, the light goes out. Oh, I see. If the lights are out, yeah, but they're also...
Anything which has sensory input, which relies completely upon sensory input.
Well, everything does. But
that's partial.
Partial. Can you think of a popular game that involves partial observability? Adam.
Battleship.
Sure. Yes. Absolutely. You don't know what's going on. You can do some sensing actions. And the cool thing about sensing actions is that what they change, I guess, what they change is your state of knowledge. They don't really change the state of the board. It's not like the other, in Battleship, the ships are static. If I had the game I played as a kid. So the state is actually not changing. The only thing that's changing is your knowledge state. So it's like those sensing actions are actions that don't modify the world, they modify your mind, which is... Well, that's the happy thing about the children's game, at least the way I played it.
I like to put an atoll somewhere in the ocean in mind, so the indigenous species just die off. It's like,
yeah. I think I talked before about whether the situations in which the initial state may or may not be known. So in conformant planning, you don't know the initial state, but sometimes you do, and that's nice, handy. Did I give an example of a conformant planning problem? Anybody remember? Here's a really simple one. Let's say I'm in a simple world, and I want to get here, and I don't know where I've started. So what's a plan that will get me there, no matter which state I start in? So down, down, left, left will always work.
Do you know your orientation?
You know, I was thinking about like the vacuum world dynamics. So I was thinking of like south, south, west, west. How about that? South, south, west, west will always work. Like wherever I am. If I'm here, fine. If I'm here, fine. Wherever I am, south, south, west, west will always work. So that's a conformant plan.
Yeah, unless there's a wall.
Well, in this world, it will work. Yeah.
Okay.
If you wanted to make a plan that will always work, and you have no idea what the world is like, that sounds really hard.
Or really efficient.
Yeah. Sometimes if you just can find a plan, you're happy, though. You don't care if it's a little bit inefficient. Single goal state or a set of goal states? Like, are you aiming for one particular state of the world? Or are you going to be happy as long as you're rich and famous and not in jail? Maybe rich, famous, not in jail, still married to your wife? I mean, you want to list out all the conditions. And sometimes those are not enough to fully determine the state exactly. Like whether my house is painted white or purple, do I really care? Nah, I don't know. Rich, famous, not in jail, still married, that would be probably fine. So there are different kinds of planning problems depending on what your goal is. There are even different kinds of goals. So in this class, we mostly talk about goals of achievement. I know you guys are all achievement-oriented. So like, I want to get to a state that satisfies this condition, please. But there are other kinds of goals too. So for example, for security, oftentimes you have things that are called goals of maintenance. So I don't care what you do, just make sure you visit each room at least once every half hour. If you're patrolling, for example. I don't care what order you visit, as long as you hit each room at least once every half hour. So that's not like a state you're trying to get to. That's a condition on your action path. That it has to pass, for every room, it has to pass through that room at least once every half hour. So those are also called goals of maintenance, because they're conditions that have to always be true along the trajectory, rather than just conditions on the end state. Then there are these classic distinctions between whether the action space is discrete or continuous. Are there some small finite number of actions you can take, or are there an infinite number of actions? And whether the state space itself is discrete or continuous. So people understand these kinds of distinctions? So we're concentrating right now on serial, although the grad students are doing parallel, pretty much unit time, pretty much unit cost. I guess the grad students are doing make span. Logical, offline, single agent, deterministic, fully observable, initial state, goal set, goals of achievement with discrete actions and discrete states. Like that's what we're concentrating on. But all of those different variations have been addressed in research. So it's a big world out there. There are lots of fun planning algorithms. I want to point out something about the stochastic case, though. It's really important, which is if someone tells you to make a plan for a world where things are stochastic, what is the plan? What is it going to look like? The thing that you come up with. It's probably not going to be a sequence of actions, because if one of these actions transitions in a way that you weren't expecting, you might want to take a different action than if it transitions some other way.
Set of rules? Is that what it would look like?
Well, set of heuristics. Whoa! When you use the loaded word heuristic, what do you mean by a set of lower bounds on cost to go?
Just rules of thumb.
No thumbs. No robots. Not all robots have thumbs. Shaky didn't have thumbs. You're gonna tell him he can't make a plan for a stochastic world? That is not inclusive.
I think this is what the movement planner of the human brain does, because there's this very specific part of the brain which maps out walking path, and it does this. It just like basic immediate path here, but it's loose. It's like then if something happens, it gets broader. So it gives a somewhat complete plan, but the plan allows for variance. And then if it's outside of that variance, then it has to come up with a new plan. And that's what I believe that part of the brain does.
Okay, so it's a series of actions, but the actions have associated tolerances on the states that we're willing to accept before we start replanning.
Yes.
Yeah, so no. Anyone else have a thought here?
What were you knowing?
Well, so if we take, let's say we're doing offline planning. I'd like you to come up with a plan and give it to me. Something that will tell me what to do. And just giving me a list of actions and saying, well, and then here are these parameters. When it goes outside that, all bets are off. That's too weak for me. I want something stronger. I want something that's going to tell me what to do. That's where, yeah, so that's kind of like a collection of rules a little bit, but yes, kind of like a state machine. Yeah, very much like a state machine is a particular representation. The exact name for what we want it's actually called a policy. And a policy tells you what to do in any state you might get to. So it's actually just a giant lookup table. It's not even as fancy as a state machine. It's a giant lookup table. It says, if you're in this state, take this action. If you're in this state, take this action. What is it? Proper policy has an action for every single state. But if you know your initial state, and if the actions aren't too stochastic, then maybe you actually only need a policy to cover the states that you are reachable. Like, I don't need to figure out what to do if I'm a 3-year-old in China. Like, that's not a reachable state for me at this point in my life. Sorry?
You really hope it's not.
Actually, I'd love it if there were time machines. There are so many things I would go do differently and correct about my life. So that would actually be super cool. So,
I like it if it's a not controlled time machine.
oh, if it's stochastic, that would be freaky. Aren't there movies about that kind of thing? Like, you get in the box and it takes you somewhere that you can't predict. I think.
Just randomly you're somewhere you couldn't predict.
Well, the question I always have about that kind of things is, like, do you have your own memories? Like, why is it that you are still you in a situation like that? But we're getting a little far afield. I need to tell you everything you need to know to do assignment 3, so let's not get too far. So anyway, I've got policy. So policy is a huge lookup table for all reachable states. What's the action you should take? And there is something in between called a conditional plan, which says do this, and but then look around and see what's up, and if in fact you're falling in midair, then open the parachute. If it blows up, then do this. Like it's a branching structure, so it doesn't have something to do for every possible state you could reach. It just has a few branches in it, where you do a sensing action to test some attribute of the state, and then take a different branch in the plan accordingly. So this is a linear sequence of actions, a branching structure, or a complete policy, a lookup table for all states. Nathan?
Does that mean a policy, like policies, no matter what state you're in, there's only one action it can take?
Yeah, and there's some brilliant guy that proved that that's sufficient.
For what?
For optimality. To have an optimal plan, a plan that's as awesome as possible. All you actually need is just a policy. So you don't need to have a stochastic policy or a mixed policy, I think it's called, where in order to figure out what to do, you have to roll a die when you get to the state and choose between a bunch of different actions. Like to have a single action, that suffices to get.
Well, I was wondering, like,